Hi there, my name is Spencer Pullen. I'm a library tech with the Charlotte County Libraries and History Division, and I'm here with Kathleen Harriet, and we're going to talk about shutter speed today as part of our photography seminar. So we did ISO in the beginning, then we talked about aperture, so now we're going to kind of bring it all together with shutter speed.
It's kind of like the triangle of photography. They all mean something. So I understand that shutter speed is the amount of time that the shutter is open.
Correct.
What does that do?
Well, it determines how much light is actually going to expose on the sensor, or back in the olden days, film, when you had film in there. And what the shutter is, if you're not familiar, is like a little, if you can think of like a curtain that goes up and down like this. So when the shutter's open, meaning when the curtain's open, it allows the light to come through the lens, hit the sensor, and then that is the time that curtain is open. That's actually your shutter speed, exposure time.
So the longer your shutter speed is, the longer time it's open.
Yes.
Well, okay, that makes sense. So the longer it's open, the light comes in for a longer amount of time.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Which is generally good for darker scenes. So if you've ever taken pictures and you hear the click, click instead of a click, that generally means that it's darker out, and then, or the environment's darker, and then the shutter needs to be open longer for a properly exposed photo.
I've had that happen. Probably at night too.
Yeah, definitely at night.
I'm not good with the night or moon pictures. So speaking of moon pictures, what would you suggest for the shutter speed if I'm taking a picture of the moon?
Yeah, so if you've seen our other videos on ISO and aperture, we brought this up. So the thing with shutter speed with the moon, as we discussed before, is the moon is actually a daylight shot, even though it's nighttime here on Earth. So probably don't be surprised if you're like 1/200th of a second, somewhere in there. Of course, it could go up or down, depends if it's full moon, it's a crest or something like that. But because we're actually photographing a object that's lit by full daylight, we'll say it's a full moon just to keep everything easy, then yeah, you're going to need a faster shutter speed than you would if we were here on Earth.
So if I did a slower shutter speed, I would just get this big blob.
Yes, it would actually be the white ball and the black frame. So if that's ever happened, you don't get the mountains and the craters, and yeah.
So now, because of these videos, I can take the ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed, and hopefully not get the big white ball in the sky. I'm happy. I don't know about you guys.
And this is also where manual will come in to help you, because, for example, if you shoot on automatic, like one of those scene modes, or if you shoot sometimes on P, which is short for program, we talked about that one before. When you point the camera at the sky where the moon is, and what's going to happen is it's going to read all that black, and it's going to say, oh, I need to be open for a really long time because it's dark. But if you put the camera in manual mode, and then if you set it up, because you know that what we're photographing is the moon in daylight, and you put in like ISO 100, we'll say it f8, and then maybe at 1/200 of a second, then that should get you a moon that's actually got detail on it, where you can see the craters and the mountains and all that stuff that's on the moon.
I just wrote that down. So I'm going to do that the next time the moon is full.
Yep,
I'm going to test myself.
And just put it in manual mode. You'll be good to go.
Sounds good. What other helpful things can we use shutter speed for?
So I know a lot of people will do birding. They're into bird photography. It's kind of big down here in Florida. So if you're trying to get birds in flight, I would try to stay with a faster shutter speed. So that'd be like 1/1000 would be a good place to start. And when you're looking in your camera, you won't see generally the 1 and the slash. You'll just see like 1000 or 500 or something, a number like that. So to photograph something that's really fast moving and you want to get all the detail, stop action, then that's definitely something that you would want to use a faster shutter speed for. If you're going to shoot jets maybe at the air show, same thing. I'd even go up to 4,000. Like when I've photographed the Blue Angels, I've actually cranked it up to 4,000 of a second. because those aircraft,
They're fast.
Yeah, they're moving pretty good.
You don't want to have the blue streak going to the
yeah,
sky.
the blue streak. Yeah, instead of the blue angels, they're the blue streaks. So
I saw an example of a person taking a picture of a hummingbird, and they had the quick shutter, really fast shutter speed, and it was stopped. Then they went down a little, went a little slower, and the wings were a little blurry. And then the third one was like really slow, and it was just like a fuzz, like he was flying with fuzz. So that's a good example of how the shutter speed can capture that motion in a stop motion.
yeah, and you can also use shutter speed to your advantage for creative use. Like for example, if you're photographing a waterfall, we don't have too many of those here in Florida, but up north, if you're watching this up there,
Yes.
then basically as the water's coming over the falls, you could go with a slower shutter speed, like 1/4. So that's where the camera's going to go click, click. It's going to take literally some time to complete the exposure. If you do it later in the afternoon, I'd say late evening, where maybe the sun's gone down behind the rock formation or wherever the waterfall is located, if you get seconds, so that's now when you get into seconds, you're going to see a number. So we'll say 1, and you're going to see inch marks. So anytime you see the inch marks, that means that the camera's going to be in full seconds. So sometimes what will happen is if you're fiddling with the buttons and it might say 15-inch mark or 30-inch mark, and then you press the button and then you think the camera's broke because you hear the first part of the click but it doesn't finish, but it's actually staying open that full 15 to 30 seconds. But again, if you now going back to the whole waterfall thing, so the reason why you might want to do a slow shutter speed is now you're going to smooth out that water to get that nice silky look that everybody always likes to see.
Yeah, I want to do that.
Yeah, so we just need to find a waterfall that's in Florida.
Anybody know where there's any waterfalls in Florida?
But if you do, you want to use this in Florida, the technique, for example, if you find like a pier and you can get under the pier, you could do a slow shutter speed out in the Gulf or in the Atlantic, and then that would give you the really nice silky smooth water that's kind of fun too. So that would be a good use for it when you don't have a waterfall or something like that.
Is the shutter speed also good for taking those pictures? Say you see the highway and it's got all the red lights going away, and it's like the streaks of red lights, so that's how you would do that?
Yep, just slow shutter speed. And tripod is definitely going to help you with these slower, because unless you're a statue, and I'm definitely not, I could not be like rock statue for 15 seconds. You're definitely going to want to carry a tripod of some sort. So you can get a lot of lightweight tripods, and you can even find them at Goodwill and secondhand stores really cheap.
I've seen them there, yes.
Just make sure it has the plate, the top plate that goes onto the tripod, because that's the part that you screw into the camera. And without that piece, then the tripod's kind of useless. Yeah, there's no way to attach it.
Yeah, so you don't want to have to duct tape it on.
I would love to see that. That would be awesome, a duct tape camera. This is how we roll some days, what can I tell you? We've got a big budget for this show.
So what's a good shutter speed for a portrait? Say you're taking a picture of your family for your Christmas card.
Yeah, a good average shutter speed to kind of start around with is 1/250th of a second or 1/200 of a second. There's a couple reasons for this. First of all, it's generally fast enough to stop, like you were saying, if they're going to have a bunch of adults or even some squirmy kids, it's going to be enough to freeze them if it's in the middle of the day. The other thing is if you decide to use flash, like external flash on your camera, most cameras will sync at like Canon, for example, will sync at 1/200 of a second, and then Nikon will sync at 1/250. So just kind of be safe if all the cameras, if whatever camera, you may have a Sony or Fuji or whatever it is you may have, if you stick with that 1/200 of a second, then what that's going to allow it to do is the flash is actually going to show up in the photo, because if you go too fast, the flash goes off and then the exposure's taken. So there's kind of some trickery there. Well, we'll talk about flash photography another day, but just to be safe, kind of going back to what you're saying is, again, if you have squirmy kids or adults that are getting fidgety because we always say just one more photo, right? And they're about
too much eggnog.
Yeah, they're about ready to throw the cup at you or whatever. Like, get this over with. But that's definitely a good one to start to start around with is around 1/200th of a second safe.
That sounds good.
Okay, so another thing you might see on your shutter speed list, if you go past the seconds, which is those numbers with the inch marks, it'll say bulb, like B-U-L-B, kind of like a light bulb. So if you have a remote trigger plugged into your camera, you don't necessarily need one of those. But let's say you need to take an exposure that's 2 minutes. So it's really dark out, and there's some creative effect that you might want to do. So the camera's not pre-programmed for 2 minutes, for example. Some of the newer ones are, but we'll just say that the majority of them aren't right now. So how do you get a 2-minute exposure? Well, if you put it on this bulb mode, and then you can either click and press and hold down on the shutter button for 2 minutes, or you can press and hold down on the shutter trigger for 2 minutes. So that's what's going to allow you to do. Bulb will basically keep the shutter open as long as you keep the trigger held down. So how do you do 2 minutes if the camera isn't pre-programmed? That's where you can use your watch, you could use your phone, something like that that has a timer on it. So a lot of times I'll just press and hold it and then check your watch or check your phone for the 2 minutes, and then that's how you can basically do any length of exposures. Back when I shot large format film, I've done exposures for 25 minutes.
Ooh.
So that's where I just would set basically my phone for 25 minutes and then sit there and hold it down for 25 minutes. So but
That's where you have to
not
get
too
a
many
lock
people-
on it to
yeah,
hold it
some of them
down,
do have a
yeah.
lock, so you push it down, you can lock
I'd
it, and then
seen
that
them.
saves your sanity too.
So do different cameras have different limitations on how fast the shutter will go?
Yes, depends on if you get like a starter DSLR, they'll generally, the fastest they'll shoot is like 1/4000 of a second, which sounds really, really fast. If you get something a little bit beyond that, then generally you can get up to 1/8000 of a second, which is really, really fast. As far as the slower end, generally they will count to 30 seconds with the little inch marks, and then you have bulb. They all pretty much have those. So on the lower end, that's pretty much the same. It just depends if it's 4000 or 8000 of a second. But I'll tell you, at that kind of speed, you better have a lot of light, like full daylight, or else it's going to be really dark photo.
Really dark, yeah.
And something else about shutter speed and air show, just because we're kind of talking about that. If you have a propeller-driven aircraft or a helicopter, if you shoot something at 4000 of a second, the propeller in the front of the airplane or the rotors that's on top of the helicopter, they're going to freeze in the air, and it's going to look a little weird. I mean, nobody wants to see an airplane with no propeller moving. So what I would recommend is maybe slowing your shutter speed down to, like, I used to use 1/160, or it's right around that 1/200 of a second, depending on the lens that you're using, if you have a tripod and all that kind of stuff. But that should be able to pretty much stop the airplane, depending on how fast it's moving, and still give you that little bit of a blur that you want on either the propeller or the rotors.
I want to thank Spencer Pullen for teaching me ISO and the f-stop for the apertures and the shutter speed. I have learned so much in these 3 videos that I have seen my pictures that I've been taking improve so much. I actually got a moon picture. I was very proud of it. But I really want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and teaching me all the many things that you're teaching me here.
No worries, and that's what this is all about. This is one nice thing about photography in general is most people, they like to share and help other people advance in whatever it is that they want to do within photography, whether it's landscape, portrait, birding, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're all in this together to help each other. So that's always nice to see when somebody just gets started, and then when you've helped each other out for whether it's a few weeks or months, whatever it is, and then all of a sudden people can start entering contests and things like that. So it's always fun to see.
When that light bulb clicks and you really get it.
Yeah.
That's what this has really helped with me.
Good.
We hope you enjoyed the video, and we're going to come up with some more stuff to show you the next time. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you soon.
Have a good one.